I never imagined I'd be sharing my story like this, but here I am at 32, watching my family's business crumble while my sister begs for help. The same sister whose success led my family to cast me aside. Life has a way of taking unexpected turns, doesn't it? Looking back now, I can still feel the sting of that day when my parents threw me out of their house. You might wonder why parents would do such a thing to their own daughter. The answer is both simple and heartbreaking. I had managed to secure MBA funding without their precious help, and my golden child sister, Jessica, who's 36, couldn't bear the thought of my independence. I need to tell this story, to let it all out, hoping that perhaps you might offer some wisdom or simply a virtual shoulder to cry on. Let me paint you a picture of our family dynamics, as clear in my mind now as it was back then. I was always the square peg in a round hole, powerless, at the back of the line, never quite fitting in. From the very beginning, it was crystal clear who the favorite was. Growing up in our suburban home, my parents would practically throw a parade whenever Jessica brought home an A. While I was wondering what we'd have for dinner, they were busy celebrating her latest achievement as if she'd won the Nobel Prize. Jessica, my sister, was the sun around which our family orbited, the constant center of attention. Everything seemed to come naturally to her. The charm, the social grace, the effortless success. In school productions, she'd always land the lead role, and as team captain, she'd score perfect grades as if it were simply her birthright. Meanwhile, I was the awkward bookworm who found solace in the quiet comfort of my room, losing myself in the logical world of computer programming. My parents treated Jessica like she was some kind of child prodigy, showering her with everything when she got into that prestigious business school. Tuition, trendy clothes, a luxury apartment in the city, even spring break trips to Cancun. They were so proud of her success that they'd brag about it to anyone who'd listen, while I learned to keep my head down and make my own way. I worked through college, taking out loans and holding down part-time jobs while earning honors in computer science, but there was no celebration for me. All I got from my mother was a casual, "That's nice," followed immediately by, "Have you seen Jessica's graduation photos?" The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Today, I manage projects at a digital firm. It's a good job that pays the bills, but I've always yearned for something more. I dream of starting my own business, climbing the corporate ladder, maybe even becoming a senior executive someday. That's why I made the decision to pursue an MBA at a top university. The catch? The tuition costs were astronomical, stretching into 6 figures. I had hoped, perhaps foolishly, that my parents might help, given how they'd covered every penny of Jessica's education. One night, after a family dinner, I carefully broached the subject with them. Ironically, the conversation had been centered on Jessica's recent achievements at the family restaurant. I laid out my strategy, explained the program, detailed how it would advance my career, and then carefully touched on the subject of tuition. The look on their faces. You'd have thought I'd asked them to sell their kidneys. They told me point blank they couldn't pay for my education. I understand that an MBA isn't cheap. But what really set my blood boiling was their refusal to even co-sign my loans. I wasn't asking them to foot the entire bill. I just needed their help to ensure I wouldn't drown in debt for the rest of my life. Their logic was infuriating. They claimed they'd already paid for Jessica's education and needed to think about their own future now. The worst part? They were planning to expand the family restaurant and had apparently invested all their savings into it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you could afford to pay for Jessica's entire education, but you won't even co-sign for me? I asked, my voice steady despite the trembling in my heart. My mother's response cut deep as she declared, with what she must have thought was bravery, that Jessica's education had been an investment in the family business. Your MBA would only benefit you, she added, as if I wasn't even part of the family, as if my success meant nothing to them. I felt completely lost. watching my parents place unnecessary obstacles in my path. But I was determined not to let this opportunity slip away. While they seemed to have endless resources for Jessica, they suddenly needed to be cautious and frugal when it came to me. I had only one option left: Aunt Linda. Let me tell you about Aunt Linda, my father's sister, who couldn't be more different from my parents. To be honest, she was far more successful than them, working as a neurosurgeon. She had always been kind to me, and practical too, seeing things for what they really were. Family gatherings always had this strange tension between her and my parents. They'd put on a show of politeness, but I could see right through it. My parents were jealous of her success. My father, especially, hated being overshadowed by her. I remember overhearing arguments when I was younger, where my father accused Aunt Linda of undermining him and speaking ill of him. At first, I was hesitant to involve her in this situation, but I was desperate. One day, I reached out to her and explained everything. The refused support, the MBA, and how much it meant to me. Aunt Linda didn't hesitate for a second. She told me, of course, she would help, asking why I hadn't come to her sooner. She said it would be her honor to invest in my future, as she had always believed in my potential. I was incredibly grateful, but terrified of my father finding out. I knew he would be furious if he discovered I had gone behind his back to ask his sister for help. I begged Aunt Linda to keep it a secret, and understanding the complicated family dynamics, she agreed. For a while, everything seemed perfect. The tuition was paid, I was preparing for my MBA, and for the first time, I felt like I had one. I felt both anxious and excited about the future, finally tasting victory. Then Jessica decided to ruin everything. To this day, I'm not sure how she found out about Aunt Linda's help. Maybe she checked my emails when I wasn't looking, or perhaps she overheard a phone call. But like the spoiled child she was, once she knew, she couldn't let it go. She had to make a dramatic production out of it. One night, after a long day at work, I came home planning to share some exciting news about my MBA orientation. The moment I walked in, I sensed something was wrong. The house was eerily quiet, the air thick with tension. When I entered the living room, my heart sank. All my belongings, books, clothes, even my bedding, were packed in boxes. It felt like the house itself was trying to erase me. Jessica stood off to the side with a smug expression, while my parents sat on the sofa, their faces a mix of disappointment and anger. I felt like I had walked into an ambush. My father wasted no time, throwing a stack of papers at me and demanding an explanation. My hands trembled as I picked them up, but I couldn't comprehend a single word written there. That's when I realized Jessica had completely lost her mind. She had fabricated fake emails between Aunt Linda and me, making it appear as if I had betrayed the family. The email suggested that I had traded family restaurant secrets for tuition money, recipes, supplier details, even financial information that I never had access to, though Jessica did. I couldn't believe my eyes. She had gone through my laptop, found the real emails between Aunt Linda and me, and altered them using Photoshop or some program to paint me as a traitor. I was stunned, stumbling over my words as I tried to explain that none of it was true. I told them these emails were forged, that I would never do something like this. But my parents wouldn't listen to a word I said. My mother was crying, and my father's face was red with anger as he accused me of stabbing them in the back. No matter what I said, they believed Jessica. Of course they did. They had always believed her. I felt like I was disappearing from the world. All those years of being the good daughter, working hard, staying out of trouble. It felt like they meant nothing. In that moment, I realized I would always be their second choice, and they would always doubt me. My father's voice was ice cold as he told me to get out, saying they wouldn't keep a traitor in their house. I begged them to reconsider, tried to explain that Aunt Linda was just helping me the same way they had helped Jessica with her education. But they didn't even acknowledge my words. I didn't want to burden Aunt Linda, especially since she had already promised to pay for my tuition. They called me a traitor and refused to have anything to do with me. Jessica just stood there, her smug expression unchanging, her eyes saying more than words ever could. She had won. The sister I had always seen as my rival had finally succeeded in erasing me completely. That was it. When I fled, all I had were a few boxes of belongings and the clothes on my back. As I loaded my car, I could see the neighbors peeking through their windows, no doubt intrigued by the drama unfolding. I felt completely alone, betrayed, and humiliated. The moment I got into my car, I called Aunt Linda. I was crying too hard to speak, but she didn't ask any questions. She just told me to come to her apartment right away. I don't know how I would have moved forward without her. Today, I live with Aunt Linda, who has become more than just a shelter from the storm. She continues to support my MBA and has become my rock through all of this. But that night remains crystal clear in my memory. I can still see Jessica standing there with that triumphant smirk, my parents looking at me like I was some kind of criminal, and all my belongings packed away in boxes. When I first walked into that house that night, I had no idea what to do. Part of me wants to defend myself, to prove that Jessica was lying. If I look carefully enough, maybe I could find evidence that those emails were fake. But another part of me just wants to cut all ties and never look back. Why should I fight for people who are so eager to think the worst of me? How do you process being abandoned by your own family, betrayed by the very people who should love you unconditionally? How do you move forward from something like this? The MBA program starts in a few weeks, and instead of being excited, I'm battling emotional trauma. I keep replaying everything in my mind, wondering if I missed any warning signs. Was Jessica always this cruel? How could my parents discard me so easily? How will I ever trust people again? Aunt Linda keeps telling me to focus on the possibilities the MBA will bring. She says success is the best revenge, but it's hard to ignore the pain and anger of this moment. I desperately need advice on how to move forward. How do you rebuild your life when your own sister would go to such lengths to hurt you? How do you handle this? How do you face MBA professors and classmates when you're so broken inside? I feel like I'm drowning. But now, 3 years have passed since I last wrote about being thrown out by my family, and so much has happened. Let me tell you how things have developed. First, I completed my MBA program. It transformed me in ways I never expected. Though I started emotionally unstable, I channeled all that energy into my studies. I graduated at the top of my class, though it wasn't easy. The insecure girl who always felt inferior is gone now. In her place stands a woman who knows her worth and isn't afraid to show it. After graduation, I landed a position at a prestigious consulting firm. The work is demanding, but I love it. For the first time in my life, I'm in an environment where my skills and dedication are truly valued. I'm no longer living in anyone's shadow. Throughout this entire journey, Aunt Linda has been my anchor. She's become the loving family I never had before. She's given me more than just a place to stay. We discuss everything from her fascinating medical cases to my latest projects. Over our nightly dinners, I learned to stand up for myself and recognize my own worth. For 3 years, there was complete silence between me and Jessica and my parents. No emails, no messages, no calls. It was painful at first, but as time passed, I realized their absence had allowed me to grow in ways I never could have while living under their shadow. I built a life I could be proud of, free from the constant need for approval and endless comparisons. But life has a way of throwing curveballs. Last Saturday, just when I thought everything was going perfectly, Jessica showed up at my door. I barely recognized her. Gone was her air of superiority and polished outfits, replaced by a basic sweater and worn jeans. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hair was hastily tied back. She looked defeated. "Hey," she said in a small voice, "can we talk?" Curiosity won over my instinct to slam the door, and I let her in. Jessica perched nervously on the sofa and blurted out, "I need your help." The restaurant. "We're in trouble. Serious trouble." She explained that the family business was on the brink of bankruptcy. The expansion plan my parents had such high hopes for had failed completely, and they were drowning in debt. They had overspent and overborrowed. Her voice trembled as she told me our father was considering bankruptcy. "Mom's falling apart, and I don't know what to do." As I listened, I experienced a whirlwind of emotions. There was a twisted satisfaction. Wasn't this karma for what they did to me? But at the same time, I felt something close to sympathy, though not quite. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "What do you want from me?" Jessica looked at me with desperate eyes, saying how well I was doing with my new job and MBA, that she had hoped I might help them, give them advice. I understood what she was asking for, though she couldn't bring herself to say it outright. She wanted money. The irony was almost unbearable, the golden child coming to the outcast for salvation. "Let me get this straight," I said, keeping my voice steady. "After everything that happened, after 3 years of silence, you're coming to me for help?" Jessica's face showed shame as she spoke in a quiet voice. "I know I was wrong. I was jealous. You were always so capable and smart. When I found out Aunt Linda was helping you, I got so angry. Please, let me apologize." 3 years later, and all she could offer was a simple apology. "I'm sorry isn't enough, Jessica," I responded. "You have no idea what I went through." "I do," she replied with tears in her eyes. "But aren't we still family? Isn't family supposed to help each other? Won't you at least think about it?" The word family hit me like a physical blow. After everything that happened, we were still bound by blood. I told Jessica I needed time to think. She left her phone number and walked away with disappointment written across her face. And now, here I am, trying to decide what to do. On one hand, I've worked so hard to build this new life. I've finally broken free from the family drama, the constant comparisons, and that feeling of inadequacy. Do I really want to get pulled back into all of that again? But there's this small part of me that still cares. When I think about my parents facing bankruptcy, I feel something. It's not quite sympathy, but it's not indifference either. Part of me sees this as an opportunity to show them what they lost when they rejected me. A chance to prove definitively that I'm not the failure they always thought I was. But when I remember how they treated me, I wonder if it's worth it. Do I owe them anything? Will this really change things? Even if I help them, even if I do everything right, I'll always be the second best daughter in their eyes. Please read this. I'm torn. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Should I protect myself and let them solve their own problems, or should I help them and risk getting hurt again? I've been thinking about this for days, but I still can't be sure. Part of me wants to move forward, reach out, and help pull them out of this mess. Maybe it could be a chance to rebuild our relationship on more equal terms. But another part of me is screaming to run. I'm still healing from the deep wounds they inflicted. Do I really want to expose myself to that pain again? I talked to Aunt Linda about it. As always, she was encouraging and promised to support me no matter what happens. But she also warned me. She said sometimes helping others requires sacrifice, telling me to be careful not to burn myself to keep others warm. Lately, I've been distracted, and my colleagues at work have noticed. Some have listened sympathetically, though I haven't shared the details. One of them said sometimes the most professional thing to do is to separate personal life from work. Those words have stayed with me. My MBA courses in crisis management and business recovery keep running through my mind. I probably could help them, provide strategies to get out of this situation. But should I? Do I have any obligation? And what about Jessica's apology? Is it enough? Is this another manipulation, or can I believe she's truly sorry? I'm also worried about how this might affect my own financial security. I'm doing well now, but I'm not making that much money. Helping them could put my own future aspirations at risk. The one thing I know for certain is that whatever I decide this time, it will be on my terms. I'm not that scared, insecure girl anymore. No matter what happens with my family, I'll remain the strong, fulfilled woman who knows her worth. Reddit, what do you think? Should I prioritize my mental health and let my family deal with the consequences of their decisions, or should I help them? I could really use an outside perspective on this. Second update, it's me again. I'm back sooner than I expected with an unexpected development since my last update. Remember how I was torn about whether to help with the family restaurant situation? Well, fate had another surprise in store for me. A week after Jessica's visit, my parents showed up at my workplace. Yes, you read that right. They tracked down where I work and appeared in the lobby one afternoon. It was like a system shock. My heart nearly stopped when my assistant informed me during a meeting that I had 2 visitors. Walking to the lobby felt like walking to my own execution as I excused myself from the meeting. My parents looked older and more tired than I remembered. My father's shoulders were more stooped than I'd ever seen them, and my mother's hair had gone completely white. The weight of 3 years of silence hung between us as we just stared at each other for a minute. Finally, my father said in a rough, surprisingly small voice that we needed to talk. Not wanting to have this conversation at work, I led them to a nearby cafe. An uncomfortable silence enveloped us as we sat with our drinks. I was determined not to make this easy for them, so I waited for them to speak. My mother spoke first, adding in a trembling voice that they were wrong. She said they shouldn't have thrown me out, should have listened to my side, and were deeply sorry. For 3 years, I had dreamed of this moment countless times, but now that it was happening, I felt nothing. Just a deep emptiness. No relief, no joy, not even anger. Come home, my father added. We can get through this difficult time as a family. I took a sip of coffee to buy myself time. Why now? I asked. Why after 3 years of silence? After they exchanged glances, I realized there was more to this story. As they began to explain, the depth of their desperation became clear. The restaurant was a complete failure. Not just financial difficulties. They had failed in their expansion and had resorted to illegal measures to keep operating: tax evasion, health code violations, suspicious dealings with suppliers. Now they were facing not just bankruptcy, but potential criminal charges. We need your help, my father said in a barely audible voice. Your business knowledge and connections might be our only salvation. I sat there stunned. The parents who had abandoned me with false accusations, who had always treated me as second best, were now looking at me as their only hope. Let me get this straight, I said, struggling to maintain my composure. You threw me out, assumed the worst without evidence, didn't contact me for 3 years, and now you want me to save you from your illegal activities? My mother reached across the table, but I pulled back with tears in my eyes. We know we don't deserve your help, she pleaded. But we're still family. We don't know what else to do. Please. There was that word, family, again. But as I looked at them, I realized they weren't my family anymore. Aunt Linda was family. She had provided unwavering support. My family was the friends I'd made at work and in my MBA program, people who respected me for who I am. Taking a deep breath, I said, "I'm sorry." I surprised myself with my calmness as I continued. "I can't help you. You're not just asking for money. You're asking me to sacrifice everything I've built. My career, my principles. I can't do that." The shock on their faces was almost comical. They clearly hadn't expected me to refuse. Anger colored my father's face. "After all we've done for you. What exactly have you done?" I interrupted. "Paid for Jessica's education while denying me support? Used false pretenses to exclude me? Favored her all my life?" My mother was now crying loudly. "Please, you'll destroy us completely." A twinge of guilt stabbed at my heart, but then I remembered the hardship, pain, and self-made success of the past 3 years. I stood up and said, "I'm sorry about your situation, but these are the consequences of your own actions. I can't save you. We'll go bankrupt," my father shouted at my retreating back. "Is that what you want?" I stopped, turned, and faced them. "I want you to take responsibility for your actions. I want you to understand what you lost when you threw me out. But most of all, I want to be free of your drama and manipulation." I walked out of the cafe, leaving my parents behind. Stepping onto the street, I felt as if a weight had been lifted. I had finally chosen myself, set boundaries, and stood up to them. But the story doesn't end there. I thought long and hard about the confrontation. After much reflection, I concluded that simply walking away wasn't enough. Their illegal activities could harm others if allowed to continue. So I made the difficult decision to report the restaurant's illegal operations to the relevant authorities: the police, IRS, and health department. Even knowing it was the right decision didn't make it any easier. The consequences were swift and severe. Jessica called me screaming with accusations, blaming me for destroying the family. My parents left voicemails alternating between begging for help and threatening legal action, but I stood my ground. I reported what I knew to the authorities and made it clear that I had no involvement in any illegal activities. Aunt Linda stood by me through these difficult weeks, reassuring me that my actions were morally right. While the investigation is still ongoing, the restaurant has been closed for a comprehensive audit, and Jessica and my parents face serious legal consequences. It's not a happy ending, but it's a just one. Actually, I'm in a better place than ever before. The toxic family dynamics that tormented me for years are over. I have a successful career with prospects for promotion. Thanks to my colleagues' support, I found my place as a true professional. My relationship with Aunt Linda is closer than ever, and we're planning a trip together once everything settles down. It hasn't been easy, and sometimes I question if I made the right decision when I'm feeling down. But when I remember all the years of manipulation and favoritism they put me through, I know I made the right choice. 3 years ago, when I was thrown out of my home, I was confused and lonely. Now I'm independent, successful in my career, and surrounded by people who truly care about me. I'm finally free from my family's toxic influence. Some might wish for a happy family reunion, but this is my story, and I'm proud of my growth. To anyone suffering in toxic family relationships or facing difficult decisions, you have the right to prioritize your mental health. You have the right to set boundaries. Sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. Thank you, Reddit, for supporting me through this journey. You can't imagine how much your support has meant. Here's to new beginnings and creating our own happiness. Thank you for watching this video. This was a true story that happened in your community.